Well, my name is Leonard Reiss, and I am 62, almost 63, and I have been married to my bride for 42 years. It's also my girlfriend.
Well, I've been married to him the same 42 years. I'm Jannita Reiss, and I'm 60. Whose version of this story should we tell?
I'll give my version first since it's most accurate, based upon me.
Yeah.
I was actually in charge of a Youth for Christ organization in central Kansas, and I met her for the first time when she was part of the local campus life group. And one of the campus life leaders for that community had asked me to direct their campus life group in a song at their wedding. And so I did that, and they wanted it done a particular way, and so I was doing it a particular way. And this young lady thought, no, that's not the right way to do it. And so she proceeded to try to correct me in front of everybody else, and that didn't really set well with me. And so we didn't really know much more about it from that point, because I didn't really pay any attention to her. And the next year, I began noticing her, and she was on the bus route that I was driving. And I began to notice her and was pretty impressed with her, did not thinking that this was the same girl that had irritated me over a year earlier. And what I noticed about her was all the young people just clung to her, and she always was friendly, always smiling, just seemed to have a lot of joy in her life. Well, I was a student at the college there in the community, and one of my assignments was in contemporary youth ministries, and it was a 12-week assignment to ask a young person various questions, a theme for each week. I got to thinking, I thought, I wonder what makes this girl tick. She's always happy, always smiling, always full of joy. And so I began to interview her. I just was sharing with her about my history. And I began to realize, I like this girl. And I had a checklist of requirements for my wife to be. And my mother proceeded to tell me, you will be a bachelor. And as I looked at this list, I began to see she fit all of the qualifications. And so from that point on, I pretty much pleaded with God to give her to me as my wife. And the rest, as they say, is history.
The first time I remember noticing him was walking out after school to my school bus, and they're all lined up there, and he would stand outside of his bus and greet students. And I happened to have a patch on my jacket that said I climbed Horn Peak. And as I was walking by him, he asked me about that patch because he also had gone to Horn Creek Ranch, but not the same time I did. And so that was, for me, the first time I really remember a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. And it was the next year that you became my bus driver. And so that was a surprise too, that I remembered meeting him, and then he picked me up for school every day. And through that process, I got to know him better. But I must say, after the first interview, actually, he invited me to a football game for our first date, because he said, I've just been learning about you. Now I feel like you should know a little bit about me. So he picked me up for a football game that Friday night. I'm in my complete band uniform, the hat up to here and the spats and everything. And so I felt, I didn't know if it was a date. I didn't think it was a date, but I felt really silly being picked up like that. But that was the time we got a chance to talk, and where I learned about him. I learned that his parents had been divorced, and for me I wasn't interested then, because I didn't want to be involved in a family that was broken up. But over the course of the next 12 weeks, where we did meet in school, in the guidance counselor's office once a week, we went through things, and we got to know each other better that way. It really was kind of an interesting way, almost like a weekly date that was planned by someone else for our subjects to talk about. That's just the short version.
That's the short version. You want to hear a long version?
He picks me up for school every day.
It was her smile, her joy, and I discovered she had just an incredible love for the Lord. Well, first of all, I planned on being single, but then I knew that in my life I wanted to serve the Lord. She seemed like someone who was also sold out to the Lord 100%.
I can't think of a certain moment or whatever. I feel like he just kind of grew on me, and I
kind of like a
liked
fungus.
Him more and more. He liked me, and he treated me special. Many Monday mornings he would bring me a card or a note, and
or a poem.
Yeah, I started to look forward to those things. At first, I was kind of embarrassed to get them, and then later I started to look forward to it. But anyway, I think he had a really nice grooming process of our relationship to the point where he went away for a weekend with a college group, and then that's the weekend I realized how much I missed him. I was very excited when he came back, and that was the turning point for me.
She jumped off the front porch into my arms, about knocking me over, which was really great. Well, interestingly, all my life I've been extremely healthy. I've never taken medications, and I've just been very blessed with very good health. And if I would get hurt or something like that, I'd, as it were, walk it off, and tough it out. And the day before, we went on a hike with another daughter and her family, and didn't notice anything, but when I went to bed that night, my upper lip felt a little bit tingly and numb, which was really kind of weird. It was like if somebody gave me a shot of Novocaine in it or something like that. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. I wonder what the deal is. And then it happened 2 or 3 times in the night. And the next morning it happened when I went to shower. And when I was writing in my journal that morning and having my devotions in the living room. And I just felt like something's not right here. I'm having a hard time focusing. I feel like my eyes are blurry a little bit. And so I asked your mother if she'd come in there and look at my eyes, and she didn't notice anything much. I said, well, I must be hungry. So I went in and had breakfast, and then I had that feeling in my lip again, and all of a sudden I could feel like something's not right. I started getting real blurry. I don't remember what exactly happened at that point, but I lost the ability to move my hands and feet, and I started mumbling, and
the word I understood was ambulance, which you didn't say clearly, but that let me know you were in big trouble. And it called 911, called for an ambulance, said, I think my husband's having a stroke. They got here in, I believe, 11 minutes, and came in, and he was unable to move, as far as I know, either arms or legs.
Yeah, I couldn't move legs or arms.
They strapped him in a chair that wheeled him out and put him on a gurney outside where it was raining and took him off in the ambulance. So I called a couple friends. They came over and we followed the ambulance to Bangor. So that began our journey. It must have happened there at the breakfast table, but then also at the hospital, they were able to give him a TPA, which is a clot-busting medication, which helped him almost to be symptom-free for a while.
I figured I was going to preach that Sunday.
He was able to move both hands. He could do any directions the nurses gave him. So that was approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I decided, okay, he's better. I'm going to go have lunch. Went down with the friends and family that were there, and then they called me just within 15 minutes and said, you need to come back. And he had had another stroke right there in the hospital.
it was at that point that it was severe enough that I ended up being in the hospital for 28 days.
And your right side was definitely affected, and your speech at first. So he was in ICU for 4 days, then on a regular floor for a weekend, and then he moved into the therapy unit. Except for 3 nights, I was able to stay with him every night. I brought a cot. I stayed with him for therapy, and we just have gone through this journey together.
Yeah, and the stroke was the type of stroke, I guess it was at the base of my brain stem and at the top of my spinal cord. And it was supposed to have been so bad. It was like 300 pages, you said the write-up was.
That's what our doctor said.
Our doctor said that. The type of stroke that should have either killed me or made me so that I could only communicate by blinking my eyes. So, and even in the ambulance over there, I just was praying, Lord, if you're ready for me to come home, I'm ready. I'd rather not, because I want to see my family grow up and grandchildren, spend more time with my wife. You know, the therapists over there were the best therapists. A couple of them were Christian people, and they worked hard with me, and I had to qualify, which basically meant how stubborn are you and how hard are you willing to work.
They looked at his physical condition, but they looked more at his mental willpower to work at it.
Yeah.
And that's what helped him as far as getting through the physical side, not to make light at all of God's
right, absolutely. But it was neat because the medical people there loved Jannita. They were just very taken by her.
I was surprised later when I looked back over the time. There was never a time that I got a pit in my stomach or I thought, oh no, I can't believe this is happening. It was I've got to do the next thing. I have to make this phone call. I have to get there. I have to be there. I was covered with what I call a peace beyond understanding. And later, it was way after we had been out of the hospital that I looked back and thought, I guess he could have died. It never crossed my mind that he would die. I think God didn't make me think that through because he knew he wasn't going to, so I didn't have to go there. So I just was aware of what's the next step. We're in the ICU now, so we have to do this. Now we're moved here. This is the next thing. Let's do this therapy. And I was pleased at watching the improvements. I recorded a lot of things, kept a record. I started a journal that day.
And we were getting ready to celebrate our 40th anniversary. Well, how I felt having the stroke was like, this is weird. This is something I never ever would have guessed. You don't prepare for something like that, and especially because they were saying your lungs are fantastic, there's no blockages. They did an EKG, was it? Heart was strong. My core muscles were strong, and so I kind of say, so why? You know, and then I realized, okay, I preach God is sovereign. Nothing catches him off guard. It's not like God said, oh wow, that slipped past me. It's for a purpose. If it's nothing else, it's teaching me to be more reliant upon the Lord. And maybe it's been a benefit to others. You know, I always hope and pray. And even in the hospital, our goal was
to reach out to the staff. Yeah.
For Christ.
Really, the steps were kind of planned out for us, and according to as much as he could build up his muscles and how his hand would respond and all. So most of that happened in the hospital, learning to eat again and hold a spoon. And it was very rough at first. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
But he went through those stages, and after he was released and we had home therapy.
Right, the home therapy.
Things just kept on improving. He's definitely not back to where he was, but he only had 4 days of speech therapy, and his speech, it still has improved since then, but mostly no one would ever know now that he'd had a stroke as far as speech goes. His walking is probably the most difficult thing right now. He can walk okay, but his leg catches a little, and he certainly couldn't run.
And 7 weeks after the stroke, I preached again.
Sitting in this chair.
Yeah. Very supportive, praying congregation.
And that was a huge help too.
Yeah.
We had huge support
Yeah.
from the congregation that day, and every day we had visitors.
Yeah.
20, 30 people a day. The first few days in the ICU, 70 some people would come per day to visit, to support me.
The hospital said they'd never had that many visitors for one patient before.
I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. And for me, emotionally, probably had a lot to do with how I felt very supported and held up by prayers and people. I never felt alone. I never felt scared. I think that community around us made such a difference.
And it's interesting because when we get married, we promise in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, all that. And I've always felt like that was more for me because I'll never get sick. You know, I'll always be, you know, I'm a tough old bird. And yet here, it's been hard for me to have to say, would you do this for me, please? Could you do this for me, please? Even sometimes buttoning my left cuff with my right hand. The fingers don't want to do what they're supposed to do, or little things like that. So I'm learning how to ask and accept.
Those are little things,
Yeah.
because nothing compared to not having a husband.
Well, the rehab was, I think, 3 weeks in the hospital, and there was several months of either home therapy or going off to the therapy places. It was about 6 months afterwards, and they basically said, you know what to do. You can keep on improving. Some people plateau and never improve further. So we actually got some exercise equipment, which I'm not very good at using. I should use a lot more. I like it when other people use it, but that doesn't help me.
Help you.
But I walk to and from church. Emotionally, it's frustrating. It's frustrating not being able to walk all day and never tire. It's frustrating not to be able to quickly run over and do something, or quickly jump over and do something. Having limitations, I think, bothers me. But then I realize that's okay. I'm still doing what God has called me to do.
For me, I guess I don't even feel like I needed emotional healing. Part of it is because he's still so capable. He still pays the bills and has a job and gets a paycheck, and the things that we need are supplied. And so I'm not noticing such a huge change as if he was suddenly incapacitated or if he was mentally unable to care for the things that he always did before. So it's less of a difficulty for me. I mean, I know he has difficulty with some physical things, but otherwise, not a lot has changed.
I think for me, I had an even greater appreciation for Jannita. I think back to when she stayed with me all the time at the hospital. That meant the world. Don't want to take it for granted. In fact, that was one of my prayers is, Lord, help me to be the husband I need to be.
Yeah, I feel like our marriage is strong as ever, and I don't know, I just think we maybe appreciate each other more, knowing how quickly things could change. Not that the relationship would change, but our situation could change, and he or I could be completely dependent on the other, and that would be something to adjust to. But we know that we've gone through this, and so we can handle whatever God gives us to handle, because God's the one that helps us to handle it.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's how I felt so at peace too, because I knew God was in charge, and he wasn't going to let something happen that he wasn't going to help us with. So I was very comforted by that.
I think we both have come in our lives to understand that a crisis doesn't have to be a crisis. If Christ is in the home, in the individual, in the couple, we literally cast all our cares on him. We trust him. We rejoice in him always. You know, all those things sound trite and trivial, but to me, I didn't see this as a crisis that could make or break us in any way, shape, or form. I just saw this as this is one more classroom of God's training. I probably wouldn't have signed up for this course, but somehow the registrar of heaven put me in this class, and so that's what I have to deal with. And that's okay, because after all, we want to become more and more like Jesus. That's ultimately what we want to do. And we've always desired that our marriage would reflect Christ in the church in such a way that other people would see Christ in our marriage, and which makes the marriage actually easier. I'm not sure that wanting to change anything, all I can think of is, like I said, I wouldn't have chosen to have a stroke. But again, we don't know God's plans. I am grateful that it happened when it did and not this year.
I can't think of anything I would have changed. I felt like everything happened according to God's plan, like timing. The help we needed got here. The friends we needed got there. The family was around, supportive. Maybe they would have changed some things that, maybe they could have come to the hospital more or whatever, but they were there a lot. So I don't really know. For me, I can't think of anything that would have changed. It just happened the way it was supposed to, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously the thing I'm most thankful for is my salvation through Jesus Christ, because were it not for him, I would never have sought for someone like Jannita. Were it not for him, she'd have never said yes. Were it not for him, we'd have had struggles that were based upon man-centered thinking and selfishness, and even then we might struggle with those areas of selfishness and pride every now and again. But when we come back down to who we are in Jesus Christ, we realize that is what identifies us, and without that relationship with him, we would not be who we are.
I agree with what he said, is thankful for our salvation, because knowing Christ changes who we are, makes us who we are. We always want to be growing and maturing more, but beyond that is our family, very supportive family, and I just love that they're around when they can be, they're available when they're not around, they're available for talking and for encouragement.
And they're fun.
Yeah. So I'm thankful for the measure of health that he has gotten back. Like I said, he's able to do almost everything he did before, sometimes just with a little greater difficulty, but for the most part he can do what he did before, and so I'm very thankful for that.